Welcome back to Drawing Me Out with Bill Willingham. My name is Bill Willingham, so I guess I'm the one on deck to be drawn out. As always, Brad Tomte is here with me. Say hello, Brad.
Good afternoon, morning, evening, and good night. What's going on, gang?
Did you almost do a Good Morning Vietnam thing?
I almost did.
You were kind of sliding into that Good Morning Vietnam.
I didn't know what level they had their volume set at, and if I had done that and blown out their speakers, I'd have felt bad.
Would you?
A little.
A little bad. So this week we are not doing what's on the drawing table because I have been writing all week. I have a killer writing deadline which allowed me very little time to produce anything new for the drawing board. So we're going to go right to the sketch I'm doing. This week we're having a D&D theme, Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm going to be drawing the one of the monsters that I drew for, I think it was the Fiend Folio, or it was one of the modules back then while I was in the TSR art department. But I drew a creature called the Drow, which were dark elves, and they became rather popular in D&D. And now I understand there's artists of just considerable talent doing incredible Drow paintings and illustrations. But I'm pretty sure I was the first to do them, and they kind of took off. Even briefly, I believe in Atlanta, there was a fan club strictly devoted to my depiction of the Drow Elves. And I was I spoke to one of them once on the phone, but I was the unofficial chairman or president of the club or something like that. It was flattering. But since I need to draw something D&D related for today's episode, let's do a Drow Elf.
Well, that begs the question. Let's why is it on your mind? Why are we doing D&D this week? What brought it up?
Well, recently there's been some activity or interest in the old D&D ads that I drew. Dungeons and Dragons ads that appeared in the back of Marvel comic books, and they were in comic book format. So they were, in that sense, my very first comic art, published comic art. I don't really count them as my first comic pages because they were ads. They were intended to sell the product. And of course, being my very first foray into comic work, they were a little primitive by my standards, by the standards of most people, I imagine. So it's hard to count them. But at least in that one sense, I mean, they were in comic book format. They were published in comic books. I was paid for them. Therefore, they were professional comic work. They told a story. The individual ads combined together to tell stories. I think we did 2 or 3 different stories using the comic ads at the time. And the last story, the one that appeared in the Marvel comics themselves, never got finished. Coincidentally, we were also doing a different storyline in back of Epic Illustrated, which was Marvel's kind of prestige format magazine. It was a glossy. And that story ended on a cliffhanger, never having been finished, for reasons I'm about to tell you. But it started with this. I'm going to refer to the one I've got here on my iPad, right over here in the drop-down space that is basically Brad's territory. Brad
My little playground over there.
Owns the drop space. He's going to put a easier to see version of whatever I'm talking about. But the ads came about. I was in the TSR art department drawing things like Drow Elves and slimy monsters and such. But what I really wanted to be doing was comic books. And everyone at TSR knew that I was half out the door the moment I showed up, because at some point I was going to go break into comics. So it was rather irksome that one day a copy of the first TSR comic book ad shows up, and it was not drawn by me. It was not drawn by Jeff D., the other artist in the TSR art department that was vastly into comic books, even more than I was at the time. It was drawn by someone, and I tried to look up her name, and I apologize to her because I do not remember what her name was. But it was a freelance artist that probably specialized in ad work, but sort of did a comic book type stuff because that's what the TSR ad department wanted. TSR ad department was completely separate from the art department, and so we didn't really talk to each other. I didn't even know anyone there at the time. But they came out with this, and it was this ad that we're referring to, the first of the Dungeons & Dragons ad. Immediately, we looked and said, I said to myself, Jeff D said to himself, I should have been picked to do this. Who is this person we've never heard of? And why not, with all of my love of comic books, was I not picked to do this ad? I just grumbled to myself. This was in 1980. I just grumbled to myself, being the new guy in the art department. Jeff D., who's always been kind of the type that would give him a bucket of water and he'll charge into hell. He got on his high horse or into his high dudgeon or whatever and drove down to the main offices. TSR was in Lake Geneva at the time. And we had the downtown or waterfront offices, which is all the creative stuff where the art department and the editorial department and all that, we worked. And on Spicewood Springs Road were the warehouses and main business offices, and that's where the ads department was, the advertising department. He went down there and basically read them the riot act. And here's everything that's wrong with this as a comic strip, and you should have done this, and you should have done this, and all this. I only got a secondhand version of it. And I guess I agreed with them. Over the years, I've become rather fond of this first one, a fondness I didn't have at the time. And I don't think that it's as bad as we initially thought. But it was a comic strip designed to sell an ad, sell a game. And you'll have to remember that Dungeons & Dragons was still catching on at this time. There were vast swaths of people that had never heard of the thing. And you start off with, 3 party members exploring a dungeon. There's a monster. They deal with the monster. And then another cliffhanger ending comes. And then there's a coupon to sell you the game or sell you a catalog to try and get you interested in the game. One thing that this artist did was actually show the kind of things that D&D has take place. They fight monsters. In this case, the wizard zaps it with some kind of a spell. They explore dungeons. They're looking for stuff. Kind of a standard D&D adventure. Later on, it became important because TSR was dealing with the bad publicity of people thinking it was satanic and the disappearance of James Dallas Egbert. You remember hearing about James Dallas Egbert, Brad?
Vaguely. I was not into gaming, and I was not watching the news back then.
James Dallas Egbert was a kid who played Dungeons & Dragons a lot at college, often to the detriment of his college grades. And he disappeared. And someone started the rumor that he disappeared while playing this weird satanic game, D&D. And this was the height of those rumors. Now, of course, it turned out later that he did not disappear because he was playing D&D in the sewers of whatever college town. He decided to go see his dad, who was in Texas. His parents were divorced, and he sort of just took off to see him. But that's not a sexy story. So the James Dallas Egbert story about how he, wigged out and possibly got human sacrificed playing D&D stayed with us for a while. As a matter of fact, our beloved Tom Hanks, I hope he recovers soon down in Australia, was in this TV movie, Mazes and Monsters. It was a highly fictionalized account of that incident that never really was an incident because it didn't actually happen. Anyway, TSR was wary of all the bad publicity. So in later installments, let's see if we can go to the next one. In later installments, in the second one, we were still able to show them fighting monsters. In later installments, we had to stay away from fighting, from grabbing treasure, because that's greedy, from anything satanic. So clerics couldn't be doing their clerical stuff because that shows, I don't know, magical Jesus powers that were the opposite of satanic.
Oh,
therefore
wow.
Also not they had a whole list of things we couldn't portray. By the second one, I guess we could still do it. I had nothing to do with the second one either. This was Jeff D who took it over, because remember, he went and read them the riot acts, and he said, you can fire me, but this is everything you should be doing. And they said, oh, okay, you've convinced us, you do them from now on. And Jeff D came back and said, oh boy, I'm doing the D&D ads now. Jeff D did not write them, and apparently did not feel competent to write them. So he went upstairs to the writing people. All the third floor people were the writers and editors of D&D stuff. And he said, Steve Sullivan, you like comics? You're a writer. Write this comic strip. He did not ask me. It's like, I know I'm not officially a writer. I'm in the art department. I guess you have to be one or the other. But, he's talking about, I need someone to write this. And he'd already had his back turned and going up the stairs of the third floor as I'm trying to raise my hand. I said, what about me? Well, anyway, so Steve Sullivan's writing it. Jeff D is drawing it. We continue the ads. This is in the next month's version. And once again, it continues the story. It was a whole new thing. It's like, okay. It's like those Marvel Comics Hostess ads where the hero ends up defeating the villain with Hostess products. But
Twinkies and cupcakes.
Right. They're never continued. Yeah. We're doing it, or they're doing at this point, a continued story. And it's catching on, and it's like, wow, this is something new.
And looking at it, you can actually see the comic book look to it more so than the previous one.
Oh, yeah. Jeff D.
Panels, borders, it looks a lot.
This is Jeff D at his height. You had to fit a whole bunch into very little space. I think there's 9. Yeah, there's 9 panels here, plus a coupon, plus a title. He was great at simplifying his work to get everything in. His storytelling was wonderful. I was very much intimidated by Jeff D at the time. He was quite an artist. He's not dead. He's still quite an artist, but he was back then too. But I'm thinking, okay, this is interesting. It passed me by, but how cool is this? Then with the end of this one, Jeff didn't want to continue. I do not recall why, but at one point he said to me, you do them now. And I go, okay. That was me back then.
Was it?
Yeah, I was 24 years old, and okay. So with the third episode of the back of the Marvel Comics TSR ads, I took over drawing. Steve Sullivan was grandfathered in as the writer. I like Steve. He's a pal, but I wanted to be writing them too. I'll admit that now. And we continued the story. And you'll see in the drop-in that Brad has very helpfully put right there, my storytelling was not as strong as Jeff D's at the time. But, I was a kid learning the business. I did what I could. And we continued the adventures of Indel the elf, Saren the cleric, although by this time we could no longer refer to her as a cleric, and we may not even have been allowed to refer to her as a healer by this time. Between the second and the third episode is when all the rules came down from TSR on high, saying, don't show a lot of violence. We don't want people to think it's a violent game. D&D is a very violent game. Don't show them grabbing a lot of treasure because we don't want to promote greed. Okay, take out the violence, take out the treasure. So instead, you have things like goblins attack, the wizard gestures, and then they're asleep because that's not violent. You see cliffhangers wherein suddenly our team is in danger. But are we going to see them resolve the danger next time? No, we are not. What we're going to do is see a lot of cliffhanger, monster jumps out. Next month it is after they took care of the monster. So you see a lot of the stuff that happens in between. The boring stuff of adventuring in a dungeon.
They kind of yada, yada, yada over the actual fight.
Yep. The stuff where all of your gamers are actually going to say, can we skip ahead on this part? Just let's get to the next thing. That's what our D&D ads were mostly about. In the 4th episode, which was my second foray, the dragon is about to gobble the elf. Our party breaks through a door and they all get together just as the dragon's about to attack. And then the fighter, God, what was his name? He pulls out a magic sword, which scares the dragon, and he says, okay, you guys can go. And then in the very end, the adventure's over. They're back at the tavern saying, ooh, what an adventure we had. Although they didn't really do anything. They didn't grab anything. They didn't really kill anything. But these were the ads. And that was the first adventure. We asked the ad department, do you want to keep going? We could start another story. We did a story in 4 episodes. So this time, let's do a story in 6 episodes. That turned out to have been a fatal mistake, Brad. A fatal mistake. I should have decided before I put her arms down here what she was going to be holding. I guess a couple of knives because that's Drow type. So where were we? We start a new adventure. They're in the tavern, reminiscing about old times. Then the wizard's mentor from long ago sends a ghost that says, help me, I'm in trouble. And they take off.
Ghosts were okay, but no fighting and no treasures.
No fighting. Oddly enough, there's one thing of fighting here, but it was a flashback, so they let us get away with it. We overcame many perils, but it was like, no, this was something that happened in the past. Oh, okay. Anyway, they're on the trail. We did a dungeon crawl in the first episode, so now we're doing a wilderness adventure in the second one. They encounter some druidy, foresty types. It turns out to be, what are they? Jackal wares? They're lycanthropes of some kind. The art got smaller because they kept wanting more room for the coupon, the ad itself. I learned to deal with it. But I don't know if you can see my art. I started to get to enjoy my art a little bit more. I was getting a better handle on it. This was good practice. In the next episode, the jackal wares or whatever do attack, but then they turn into ravens and fly away so that no actual combat has to occur. Then they overcome many, many more obstacles and they get to the foothills of the mountains that hold the end of their quest. And huge coupon taking up all the room. And then the terrible thing happens. In the next installment, look how big that coupon has gotten.
That's a quarter page at least, if not more, yeah.
Yeah, that's a third of between that and the title, it's a third of the available image area. So we only have 4 panels to do it. So they whoosh over the mountains with some kind of spell, a dimension door, okay. They approach the castle. Could the end of the quest lie here? Yes, the end of the quest is going to lie here because we have only 2 more episodes in which to finish this. The first one was a 4-part story. This is a 6-part story. In 2 parts, we have to wrap it up. The only problem is the ad department came to us and said, yeah, you're done. We're going to go a different way with ads. Now,
we sold enough D&Ds with comics.
Well, I think part of it is they realized something that I was sort of aware of all along, which is in comic books, why are you doing comic ads to sell your thing? You want your ads to stand out. badly drawn comics don't stand out much in the midst of well-drawn comics with adventures with different characters. So I always thought it was kind of an iffy proposition. But I didn't expect them to cut us off with a cliffhanger. Someone has pointed out recently that this cliffhanger has been hanging over our heads for 40 years. 40 years to get it resolved. At the same time, I was doing similar ads in the back of Epic Illustrated. More painterly, I was trying my painterly best. It's a different group on another dungeon crawl. Hungry lycanthrope monster lunges. We were, encountering a lot of jackalwares, apparently. I realize this now in both storylines. Jackalware. Steve Sullivan's still writing at this point. And something we didn't do before is we had the huge coupon space reduced just a bit when we told them that why don't we actually have the characters pitching the products in the context of the thing. They take time out from their adventures to say, why don't you try?
Like the old TV show stars who would stop and go, and you know what's really enjoyable? And they just start pitching the product.
They certainly would.
Yep.
I remember as a kid that Dick Van Dyke and Laura, Rob and Laura Petrie did smoking ads, and they sat in their living room and told us about how much they liked Chesterfields or whatever brand they were on. Anyway, so we did that. Then we have the next installment. These are in the back of Epic Illustrated. By the way, this first one appeared in the Epic Illustrated that featured heavily a look at Barry Windsor Smith, who was my hero at the time. I wanted to be Barry Windsor Smith. I actually sent him a letter begging to let me just come and live in his studio and do all of his scut work so that I could learn at his feet and all that kind of stuff. The moment I dropped that letter into the mailbox, I practically broke my arm trying to get it back, realizing what a ridiculous thing I've ever done. And the mailman comes along, and I'm elbow deep into the mailbox, and he's kind of like, "You can't do that. I can have you arrested." And I explained it to him, and he goes, "Yeah, I can't open this up and give you back that letter that you don't want to send." And I go, "Oh God, please! It's the dumbest thing I've ever done."
Could you just look the other way for a minute?
Right. So he took it. To this day, I wonder what happened to it, because his assistant at the time, Linda Lessman, became a friend later on, and she says, "I would have known if something like that ever showed up." It never did. I always wonder to this day if the postman took pity on me, because I was desperate. I was saying, "This is going to ruin my career. I can't believe how obsequious I was in this ridiculous letter I just sent." Anyway, that's a digression. That appeared in the Barry Windsor Smith issue of Epic Illustrated. We did some more with these characters. This time I made sure we introduced them each time. Arik the fighter, Tira the elf, the wizard Kellic. They fought monsters in the sense that you see kind of montage-y things, and you can see treasure waiting for them. That was okay as long as we didn't have them grabbing the treasure. Then we have something, it's like Arik the fighter in the next episode gets a set of magic armor. They get attacked by a worm. Stand back, only my magic can stop it. I don't think they minded wizards throwing spells. They didn't want anyone chopping anything with a sword. But you see, by the next episode, it's coming out, only my magic can stop it. By the next episode, they've resolved that. Somehow the worm got taken care of. Arik's climbing out. They're out of the dungeon. They've had many adventures. They got away with a good magic scroll, and the adventure's over. So, another 4-parter. The last ones to come, were after that, I had become beloved down in the art department, the ad department, not in the art department. I was just another schmo. In the ad department, the Marvel people were so tickled by our ads that they sent us a gift of Spider-Man ties, which were a blue tie that had just a white stripe down it and you'd have to unbutton your jacket to see that that's the web line that Spider-Man is hanging off of down near the belly of his shirt. They
nice
sent us 2 of them. Gary Gygax grabbed one and said, "This is mine." And that was my spot-on Gary Gygax impression. And one stayed with the ad department, and the main guy in the ad department, I wish I could remember his name, he's just a fine fellow, said, "Here, you're carrying the bulk of all this. You get the other one." And so Gary and I were the only, and this was pre pop culture taking over our casual wear and our formal wear, whatever. The idea of a Spider-Man tie was just as unique and unusual a thing as you can imagine. I wore it out to lunch at the Playboy Club when TSR was trying to convince me to not go do comics and stay and do art. And Gygax was having lunch at the same in the same room at a different table, and started yelling at me, good-natured, something along the lines of, "What is that remarkable tie you're wearing?" We were both wearing the same Spider-Man tie. Out to lunch at the Lake Geneva Playboy Club. But anyway, I started a new story, and this time I was writing it myself. I got permission to write it myself, and it was going to be a big epic. It was going to be 6 installments long.
Again with the 6.
Again with the 6. Well, that was the most I could talk him into. You know, I said, I could do an 8-parter. Like, 6-parter? Okay. It starts with Narek the Gnome recruiting Rory, a ranger, to go on a mission protecting this mysterious woman who needs them to go into the Badlands and rescue her dad or do something. Or maybe... Oh, she's an apprentice of the wizard Kellic. Remember Kellic from the previous storyline?
Right.
They're going to go rescue him somewhere. So it kind of ties in to that previous story. And then in the second episode, they're waiting for her to pick him up with the horses, and turns out she doesn't have horses. She's got a flying boat. That's really exciting, a flying ship. They get caught in a storm. There's a storm giant. Cliffhanger ending. Once again, TSR said, "Yeah, we're not going to do those kinds of ads in the back of Epic either. So you're done." I go, "Can I have one more to wrap it up?" "Nope, you're done." And so another cliffhanger.
Yep.
That is the story of the D&D ads. There were 14 of them total, counting the Epic Illustrated ones and the back of the Marvel monthly comic ones. 6 total in Epic Illustrated, so 12 total? No. 8 total in the Marvel comics. And they were never resolved. To this day, I've always kind of felt like, wouldn't it be nice to finish that story up someday? And interestingly enough, the rights to D&D, the publishers, are different people that are not quite so cranky, and maybe we'll do something with that. I didn't get very far in this sketch because I started talking too much and looking too much at old ads. You know what? I'm not going to do a fast forward finishing this up. Instead, we're going to continue this sketch into the next episode. Unless it's a cliffhanger and the next episode never occurs.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
And for the next 40 years, the sketch is never resolved. Thank you very much. Please subscribe, share, like.
Yep.
Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your authorities on us if we're doing something wrong. We are only about 970 subscribers away from reaching our 1,000 subscriber goal. So it's so close.
Super easy. We can
practically
reach
super
out to
easy, barely
an inconvenience.
An inconvenience. Oh, I saw that coming. Brad, any closing remarks?
No, I think we'll wrap it up. And so it is a little bit of a cliffhanger till we come back next time and you get to see it again.
This will be some kind of a drow fighter elf type, I think.
All right, so he's not going to draw us out, and we'll see everyone next time.
Bye-bye. you can edit all this out.